all parts of the world. So, welcome to yet another episode of TGIT. Thank God it's Thursday. I'm Jahana from AccuKnox. So, today we have a very exciting topic. We are deep diving into one of the most important conversations in cloud security, that is zero trust cloud detection and response, also called as CDR. So, joining me is Fernando Branco today. He is our sales and solutions engineer at AccuKnox. He has been working closely with customers to help them move from cloud noise and alert overload to clarity, context, and real signal. So today we'll decode what CDR really means and explore why cloud telemetry often becomes overwhelming, and also dig into architecture behind AccuKnox CDR and see how correlating telemetry with runtime insights turn chaos into actionable detection. So let's get started. So, Branco, let's get started with what actually is CDR and how is it totally different from traditional detection approaches?
Yes, Jahana, great question. I think first of all, let me just thank you and then the marketing team, Syed and Atarva, for setting this call up and for inviting me. And yeah, let's jump right into the topic. CDR is a very interesting topic. To understand what it is, I usually like to look at the acronym itself of CDR, which is Cloud Detection and Response. And what we're doing here, it's if you see the acronym in the definition, cloud detection, the idea is to have all of those logs that are generated because of your cloud environment, and then all the things that can happen in your cloud environment. And then we can have those in a place where the idea is to have continuous monitoring actions. So it'll be continuous monitoring the things that happen in the cloud environment. We also apply, and now is the response part, we have something called automated response, which through the logs that we receive, we can create triggers and rules, which are going to dive deep more and talk more about this later in the call. But the idea is that we can also offer, with the information that we have, the logs that we have, we can also do automated response. And in the middle of that, we also can't not talk about the intelligent detection, because CDR is not only a place where logs just sit there. The idea is that when you receive these logs, you can create detection rules, and these detection rules can send alerts. And then we're also going to talk more about this kind of alerts. But in a full context, right? If you complete everything in fully, the idea of CDR give you some sort of monitoring in one place. We also have detection rules that alert you regarding some sort of behaviors that we're going to discuss more. And then among these behaviors, we can also create automated response. And I think that's where the things become very, very interesting, because you definitely need to be very careful with what you set as automated response. And that's something that we at AccuKnox take very seriously. But the idea is to provide you a complete story. And in our CDR, I think it does a really great job regarding that.
Great, great. So, Branko, can you tell us what are the most common use cases where CDR becomes most indispensable?
Yes, of course, Johanna. So use cases for CDR, personally, in my opinion, what are it's very interesting in CDR is, for example, you can set triggers, and then those triggers they will communicate with, for example, in the case how we do it is through the GitHub pipeline, but you can set triggers that have webhook connections with GitHub. And the idea, for example, one use case would be, imagine you're creating EC2 instances if you're leveraging like AWS. And with those instances, there's always problems where sometimes you can create an instance with a lack of security rules, and then to connect to this instance, it might be very not very specific on what IPs should be allowed, so it should be very broad. And if that is broad, then we have a problem here, because anyone can kind of like connect to your instance. So the idea, one use case of CDR is to do, if we have an instance that there's not the specific filtering regarding the IP that can connect, we can set a trigger that automatically in almost runtime response, we can delete those instances so you're not exposed in our environment. So that's one use case. We also have more use cases, like if you have misconfigurations. Because with CDR, we have all of those logs that happen to your cloud environment. We also have the ability to identify things that are not configured correctly. and that's one of the beauties of CDR as well. We can, of course, do some sort of detection and remediation for security violations. We already talked about remediation, but the detection part is also pretty interesting. We can set among when we receive, we're going to talk more about the flow, but just briefly to talk about it. When the logs are pushed from the cloud to your SIM, to our SIM, we can set detection rules, and those rules are there to identify if there are common vulnerabilities or common things that we security violations that we can work through and make things even more secure. And I think the last thing we can also talk about, as mentioned in the slide, is also the compliance. We can through CDR we can ensure that your cloud environment is getting the compliance checks that is needed. It's needed, and then it's evolving through this compliance journey. We in the platform we provide in a compliance tab in our platform. You can see the percentage of the journey of like your compliance of your cloud and regarding the specific compliance. So I think that's very useful for if you have a GRC team, and then you can actually understand, okay, last month this was our percentage in this compliance framework. We made some changes. How is our percentage now? Are we close to the 100%? Because our goal, of course, is to be 100% compliant with that specific compliant. So CDR can, it's very interesting because it can drive you to all of those use cases that I mentioned and even more. But I think that's really great point for us to develop in the next topics.
That's really great. Thanks, Branco. So, according to my understanding, CDR goes beyond just collecting logs. It's about making sense of cloud behavior so we can detect real issues before they escalate, right?
Correct. Yes, you are correct, Jahana. Very nice.
All right. Next talk about a pain point most teams face: telemetry overload. What makes cloud data so messy, noisy, and hard to interpret?
Yes. Yes, I think when we usually think about those tools that collect data, the main problem is that the cloud environment can be very noisy, and of course, right, if you're hosting a lot of compute, then changes are done every second, and then in this tool that collect logs, you can definitely be overwhelmed about the number of data that you receive. So this is a very common problem actually, which is the cloud telemetry problem. Once you have this, for example, a CDR tool or a SIM, you have this problem of having a lot of false alarms and those false alarms or false positives, they can definitely put your effort in things that are not actually necessary. So that's a really big problem because in security, we know how fast we need to move. And the idea of AccuKnox is to provide you runtime security because the response is something that is critical. If you have seconds of delay in our response, that's something that can cost you a lot, and it cost you a lot of your company. So the idea is that one problem that we need to address most of the times is how we can minimize those false alerts. And then with those false alerts that we're minimizing, we're putting you in a place that you can focus your efforts in the specific threats that you need to be against. So that's one thing. We also can have, blind spots everywhere. So it's very hard to secure what you don't see. And the idea is to provide you this visibility with our tools. And then if you have this visibility, then of course, with the correct filtering so you don't get overwhelmed, as we're talking about, then we can divide the attention to a specific issue. And we have many other problems here. As is mentioning here, if you don't have enough experts, that's something also interesting to talk about. If you don't have enough security experts to be monitoring your cloud infrastructure 24/7, which it's unlikely nowadays, right now because of the lack of experts, but also because of the effort. Like you're not gonna have someone totally dedicated to looking at this specifically 24/7 for mid-sized companies, for example, or small companies. So the idea is to also with CDR give you this sort of more sensitive, more secure, and provide more brief or more relief you can have regarding the abilities in your cloud environment. So these are all coming to one big point, which is the cloud telemetry problem, and this is thing that we put our efforts to solve and to improve in this point daily. So we're going to talk more about how we kind of like minimize those issues. But I want to stop here for a moment.
Great. So yeah, so the problem is not lack of data; it is a lack of signal, right? Got it.
Correct. Yes, you're right.
Yeah. So Branco, next we can go deeper. So even with all this telemetry, alerts often fall through cracks. Where do CDR alerts generally leak? Okay, that is the thing which we are talking today, right? Where do they actually leak, and why is it such a common problem?
Yes, yes, Johanna. I think we generally don't. I don't want to generalize, but it's we should bring more attention to this specific thing, right? Where does CDR alerts, like, where do they leak? And as we see here as examples, we've been talking about excessive noise and how this can actually be be something that it's not good for your environment, because we need to act very fast, especially in security companies, or if you're dealing with security. The action of response is something that is critical. So if you have excessive noise, and then of course with the CDR feeds, with raw CDR feeds, the idea is that you don't have any capability of filtering. You're getting all the logs from your cloud environment, so you're gonna have excessive logs. So you do need to have a set of funnel, so that when it goes to that funnel, those excessive noise are minimized, and then you don't have this problem of flicking in CDR. So that's one thing. Also, if you have collectors are great for numerous reasons, but of course they also need to have an attention to see if they are configured correctly. Because if you have a collector that's pointing to a different endpoint, or if you have a misconfiguration in the collector, all of this precious data in your cloud environment, it can go to a different source. And that's critical, because of course you don't want anyone to be leveraging your data regarding your cloud environment, which you didn't authorize. So that's something that it needs to be brought to attention, especially to companies that have critical data, like healthcare, government agencies, banks as well, that deal with people's data, which are sensitive, PII, PHI. So then you need to make sure that the collectors you're using are also correctly configured, and then they're not exposing your data externally. And the last point that we can talk about as well is regarding having insecure archives and buckets, right? We talk about buckets in AWS context, but we also have archives in GCP and Azure and other clouds. But the idea is, if those are unsecure, so if any place where you're storing data is unsecure, and people can access that, which they're not intended to, then there is sensitive telemetry that's going to be exposed. And this needs to be brought to attention, because the insecurity of how you configure, if you actually research about the top reasons of vulnerability nowadays, is because of misconfigurations, human error. So we need to we like here at AccuKnox as well to focus on this attention of, we need to constantly be checking our configurations. We need to do multiple revisions of things when they are configured, because we know we're humans, we make mistakes, and things can be misconfigured. So the idea is that we, at the end of the day, we need to minimize those, and we need to, of course, bring those to attention, so we don't have insecure buckets, and those can expose telemetry, as we were talking about in this slide.
All right. So I got it. It's so it's basically because the detection. It's not because the detection is bad, but it's like incomplete, right? That is the
Yes,
thing that
correct.
actually happen. Okay, okay, got it.
Yes.
So next, let's talk about API logs. Generally, we have heard that API logs being a hidden leakage point. Can you explain why API logs are so important in cloud detection?
Yes, Johanna. Yes, API logs are also a great thing to talk about. It's very exciting, actually, because we know how also the applications, they deal with API calls. There are multiple, and then at the end of the day, it comes down to all those APIs that you receive, which ones are actually the ones that you need to take care of. So that's a problem that can it's a hard answer actually to come up with that. And the idea is that once you have all of those flows, as we can see on the screen, all of those flows of data, we can with fine tuning, with filtering, we can end up having the idea of what are the actual APIs that we need to be worried about, and the ones that we need to have a deeper look in a security perspective. So the idea here is like, of course, if we have verbose APIs, then the debug logs they can be something that if they're not with the specific precautions and with the specific protections, they can expose the logs, and they can, of course, if you're looking at the debug logs, then you can have details of the environment. So that's something that can be a leakage point that we need to address. Also, shadow APIs. Shadow APIs are a huge problem that our API security module does a great job looking at shadow APIs, orphan APIs, and Zombie APIs as well. But now have referencing about shadow APIs. Shadow APIs, for those who don't know, are those APIs where it's developed by the company, and it's not securely tested, but it's maybe used internally or used by developers to facilitate some sort of action. And then if those are interacting with your environment and they're not precisely security tested, then that's something that's very interesting to deal with, and it can definitely be a vulnerability for your environment. So if these shadow APIs generate unmonitored logs, then that's also a place where you can see the leakage of the data that comes through these APIs, and we definitely need to address those. And the third thing, when using third-party integrations, that we of course we tend to we need to sometimes use third-party integrations. That's something that it can be due to multiple reasons. But the thing that we need to brought to attention is that what is the reputation of this third party integration? Is that a reputable company where you think that the data that has been sharing? Because of course, with these interactions, there's always a little bit of data that might need to be shared. The idea is that we also need to be very focused on what those third-party integrations, if they can leak metadata externally, and then that's something that it will expose your data eventually. So the idea is to also bring this to attention, so that at the end of the day, if we have a good API security solution, we can minimize those and of course bring you more security. And that's what we're trying to do at AccuKnox.
Yes, thanks, Branco. So let's directly move into architecture. Let's talk about AccuKnox architecture and how all the signals come together. Just tell us how it is different from others and all that.
Yes, Jana. So we can see, as you can see on the screen, we have this architecture slide. The idea here, as mentioned, is you have your cloud environment. It can be from AWS, Azure, Oracle, CI, GCP, even Kubernetes, and many more clouds that we integrate. But the idea is that we get all of those logs from your cloud environment, and that's where we can see the log injection portion here. And then those logs, we put those in the AccuKnox SIEM, and then AccuKnox SIEM is where we create the detection rules as well. And then with this, we can do threat intelligence. We can apply policies, and then those policies, what they will do, the detection rules also, they will send information among what they detect to the AccuKnox CNAPP and the CDR plane and the findings page as well in the AccuKnox CNAPP. And that's where in the CDR tab is where you can create what we call the triggers. And those triggers, they are mainly there because with the detection rules that we settle in the SIEM, once we receive those logs in the CDR in AccuKnox control plane, we can create those triggers, and then those triggers, what they will do, they will have a connection, a webhook connection with, for example, GitHub Actions, if you want to do automatic remediation. And then the idea here is to show you that not all of the alerts that go from the SIEM to the CDR tab in the control plane will will actually trigger the triggers that we created. Only the specific things that were created, and those are specifically created according to the customer's priority. So let's say we, for every customer, they have different priorities. Of course, we do have some of the I would call it hardening triggers that we believe are the ones that out of the box you need to have, but it's also something that can be customized to your needs. So just to summarize the flow again, the idea is you get all of those logs from the movement of your cloud environment. Those are ingested to the SIM. In the SIM, that's where you can create the detection rules, and we can also apply policies. We'll do all sort of detection regarding AWS, GCP, Azure, VMs, or Kubernetes as well. We do the threat intelligence, and then with the logs that are received from the cloud environment and that goes through the SIM, they will send alerts to the AccuKnox CNAPP, the AccuKnox platform. And then in the platform, we can have the triggers or not. We can have specific triggers that if those are triggered, then they move to the remediation phase. And then as we can see here, the pipeline workflow, CI/CD workflow, and then the response goes back to the cloud, which will, of course, do the remediation on your cloud. So that's like how the flow and the architecture of CDR is connected. We also do one thing that I need to mention is that in the CNAPP, in the control plane of AccuKnox, if you're not talking only about CDR, we also have the CSPM, which will give you the findings. So we do CSPM scans. They're scheduled, and then we can also have their look at your cloud environment, and they also point out for you misconfigurations and vulnerabilities regarding your cloud environment. So that's the whole flow. It should be straightforward to understand, and we can definitely talk more about if you have any questions regarding that at the end. But the idea, just one more time to summarize, is we go cloud logs to the SIM. SIM, we can create detection rules. Those rules will generate alerts that will go to the CNAPP, to the CDR page. You can either do alert analysis and create triggers to do a threat response, or they can just sit on the findings page. And then through the response, we can use webhooks to trigger the pipeline and CI/CD workflows, and that will do the automatic remediation. And that summarizes the flow in a very nice way and seamless way.
Perfect, perfect. Thanks, Branco. So the architecture is basically everything. So it's what allows CDR to just move the raw data to meaningful detection, right? Got it.
Exactly. Yes, we need to as I've been talking in this webinar, right? I think that the beauty is how you can put all of those data and simplify into things that you can actually be useful for you, and that you're actually putting effort in things that matter. So that's the mission here in AccuKnox, making you putting effort in the things that actually matter.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So let's move on to next topic. So one of the biggest differentiators you mentioned is combining cloud telemetry with runtime signals, right? So how does correlation actually change the quality of detection? Can you please explain that?
Yes, yes, Jahana, great point. And we were talking this in the previous slide, but I think here it gives you a better idea of what we're actually meaning with all of this automatic remediation. And here, the correlation that we're talking about is telemetry plus the runtime. And the idea is that with the logs and the details that we received, how we can, in runtime, do something to make it more secure. Because as I've been talking to this webinar, for us security experts, the time of response is critical. So we always need to think about security needs to evolve to runtime aspects, where if you see something that is wrong, you need to take runtime or almost runtime action so you don't get compromised. Here in this flow, what we can see, we're specifically here now targeting AWS and AWS users. So to CloudTrail, the CloudTrail will send all of this telemetry to our control plane, and that can go through the SIM first and then to the control plane like the CDR. But the idea, as I mentioned, is you can create those detection rules, and those detection rules they come out of the box as we provide, but they can also be customized and things that are specific alerts that you wanna focus on. One of the very interesting things at AccuKnox is that we have this ability of feeling the customer's pain and actually providing what people need. We're not trying to be a generic tool that that everyone is going to receive the same things. The idea is we hear what you have to say, and then we can also customize the rules so the alerts they're also meaningful to you in a way that you can actually put your effort in valuable things. So we have these alerts, and these alerts. So we got a telemetry. This telemetry is now converted. It passes through the scans. It's converted to alerts, and then the alerts. The next thing is to have policies and triggers, and then those policies and triggers they can be example as mentioned before. It's like if you have a EC2 instance that it has public access from any IP. So then if we have a log that an EC2 instance was created and the security group, there is no restriction regarding the specific IP, then we're going to receive this log. We're going to have a trigger to check that. And then if that trigger is if it's triggered, then we're going to go here to this icon that represents a webhook. And this webhook is directly connected. Here we are leveraging GitHub. And the idea is we provide you a GitHub workflow script, and then you just fill it out with, for example, some of the, we of course need to connect with your AWS environment. So we need some like access key and secret key to connect with that. And then the GitHub workflow, what it does, the CI/CD pipeline, it uses the runners to send those API calls back to the AWS cloud. And then once your cloud receives these actions, then it's able to take it down. For example, as we're talking about the EC2 instance, it's able to take it down the instance. So the whole flow, the whole idea of correlating telemetry and runtime is that we can do the remediation runtime in almost runtime, and I would say in seconds of response from receiving an alert of something that shouldn't be created, and we have a trigger for that. We call GitHub workflow does all the job of sending this specific thing to the AWS cloud, and then we're able to take this EC2 instance down as an example. So that's a very interesting workflow, and this correlation is something that we've been differentiating, something that we do in a very good way.
Great. So next, let's talk about most important part, the outcomes. I just wanted to ask how AccuKnox really help teams, and how with AccuKnox we can just increase detection accuracy.
Yes. So AccuKnox, the idea, right? We've been talking a lot about this, but as you can see, there's 5 steps here. I think they summarize pretty well how AccuKnox does the CDR capabilities. So we're gonna detect first. We're gonna understand if you have. We're gonna detect your logs and ingest them, and then as we mentioned about the cloud telemetry problem, these are huge amount of logs, so we need to analyze them, of course. So then we analyze to the detection rules, and we can identify if there is malicious activity or baseline drift. And then with this analysis, if there is something that we need to worry about, then we alert. And then with these alerts, it comes the things that okay, now that we alerted, we need to investigate. And then we are investigating the alert. Just basically we're looking at the specific trigger, and then we're seeing like if with the investigation, should this trigger or not? Is the alert something that we have a trigger set for? And then if we do, then we do the remediation step. So it's a very coherent and interesting cycle that we do all of those detections in, and that's how AccuKnox can help in a summarized way.
That's great. So AccuKnox doesn't just detect; it simplifies, prioritizes, and also enforces. Right.
Exactly. Mhm.
Great. Got it. So now let's talk about how does CDR integrate with broader Equinox platform for seamless cloud security management.
Yes. That's a great point. One of the AccuKnox mission is actually the platformization, right? So the idea is that you can have all of those capabilities: CSPM, CWPP, KSPM, AISPM, ASPM, CDR, all of that in a single pane of glass. Because what we're trying to do, and the mission here, is that you don't need to have different tools and different solutions to take care and to administrate. So you're gonna have administrator just for ASPM, administrator just for CSPM. You can see all of that in a single platform. And then the integrations and also the findings, they can be also correlated. So things that we see through CSPM, they can also be correlated with what we get from the CDR. And then we can have a better detailed understanding of the things that we need to do. So the idea and the mission in AccuKnox platformization provide you all of those modules in a single pane of glass. And as you can see here, we just have a brief image of the CDR UI image. And the idea is to, as I mentioned, has been talking about this a lot. The simplification is the key. We want to provide you simple and things that you can easily understand and that are all well connected with all of the other modules. So I think that's the point that we need to make.
All right. So what we understand is that teams can manage all like CSPM, CWPP, KSP, and CR, everything from one place.
Exactly. Yes.
And okay, got it. So now let's talk about the difference. Can you please tell us how AccuKnox CDR is different from the other traditional solutions we have?
Yes, yes, Jahana. So first thing, as we are seeing here, response time, right? So as I've been mentioning, the idea, AccuKnox, we have in CWPP, we have runtime response. We've been talking about runtime security a lot. The idea is to have a response that is almost runtime or even runtime. So once you receive the logs and once those are the logs passed through the SIM and the alerts were sent to the CDR. If you have a trigger set, then this should happen in seconds. So that's a differentiation that we definitely have. False positives is something that we need to address. It's something that has been I've been hearing this a lot of from customers. How do we deal with all of those things that we think that this is an alert that should be handled, but at the end of the day, it's just a false positive. We're just getting bombarded with false positives. And how we do that, we are able to reduce to like 5%. So we have like a 95% reduction in false positives by creating Sigma rules. And those Sigma rules, they're specific from cloud environments. And we can definitely dive deep about this. AccuKnox also has resources diving deep regarding this specific detail. But the idea is that we can create those rules. Is basically we're filtering what you want to see. So if those filtering capabilities with those rules, you're not bombarded with just like things that you shouldn't be putting your effort to. And that's something we try to differentiate a lot in this because it's crucial. We don't want to spend time with things that you shouldn't be interested in. We know time is the most valuable asset that we have. So we want to reduce these false positives as much as we can.
All right.
Detection rate, yes. We also have, detection rate is 99%. Setup time should be pretty simple, just with Terraform and some CloudFormation for AWS. We can do this, and then the automated response is something that we also differentiate. Jahana, please go ahead.
All right. So I just wanted to wrap this up together. Like the main thing we want audience to understand is that what does effective CDR actually deliver to a security team?
Yes. So the idea and the effectiveness is that we want to, from all of those logs that you received, from all of those things that you can see from the CloudTrail or GCP logs or Azure logs, the idea is to simplify that and put your team in front of battles that we need to actually battle for, right? I think that's that sounds a little bit poetic also, but the idea is we want to put you in places where you're focusing your efforts to fight the battles that you actually need to fight. So reducing false positives, having response that is almost runtime, with all of this combined, and also the remediation that is automatic, we can put you in a pot in a spot that you're looking at things that actually matter to you, and not things that you're not chasing like you're not going to a habit hole or something like that. So that's something that we need to address for sure.
Yes, yes, got it. So we have covered a lot today, right? So let's take a few questions. Yeah, somebody's asking that why do we need a CDR? Like in like few words, if you can cover it up, why do we actually need it?
Yes, yes. No, I think that's a great question. So the idea of CDR, right, as we've been talking about, is it's a form of you to simplify what you receive from all of those logs, right? So we are constantly monitoring the environment. So that's something like with the detection rules that we set, we have the ability to understand, okay, uh, your environment, people are creating compute instances every time, changing configurations. And then it's almost impossible for one person to be looking at all of those changes at one time. And look, imagine being scrolling to CrowdTrail and seeing the huge amount of logs and then trying to identify, okay, this is something that is a vulnerability or not. So the idea of CDR is to provide you in one screen things that matter for you that could be vulnerabilities and that you actually need to spend some time thinking if that's something that we need to address. So the main point of the question, I would say, is to get from imagine a huge pool of logs to something that to few things that are actually simplified and they are meaningful for you to solve and then to tackle this specific vulnerability.
That's great. Thank you. So there's one more question. How does AccuKnox CDR differ from, let's say, Prisma? Does it provide more value? Can you just say what is the unique proposition of AccuKnox?
Yes, yes. So the ability, of course, Prisma has also the capabilities, the interesting capabilities in the Prisma CDR as well. But it's also considered, I would say, a legacy solution. So what we provide you is as differentiation is this flow, as we can see here in the screen. We tie things very well together. So the setup should be something pretty simple with Terraform scripts. You should be able to set up your CDR and you should already be ingesting the logs. When we ingest those logs, we should also be able to, okay, now that we ingested the logs, we push that to the SIM. We have the idea to create those customized rules. They can be either provided by the cloud provider, or we can customize and create specific rules that will differentiate to any other competitor. And then those rules, they'll push the alerts to our CDR, and then we have the alerts in the CDR, and then with the triggers that we set, we can do this automatic remediation. So I would say that the biggest differentiator is giving you a flow that's very connected and that shouldn't cause you more work for you to set it up to have automatic remediation. The idea is to also facilitate what you need to do, and that's what we provide at AccuKnox. The simplicity and simplifying the huge amount of logs. That's what we've been talking about in this webinar.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Branco, for a great session. So let's thank everyone who has joined us today for this episode of
Yes.
TGIT. And special thanks to Branco for joining us today and also breaking down Zero Trust CDR very perfectly and very clearly. So everyone joining us today, if you would like to have a demo of AccuKnox you can reach us anytime. You can just contact us through our demo page by signing us there, or you can just mail us to support@accuKnox.com. And everyone have a great day. Thank you. Stay
Thank you
tuned for
so
the
much for
next series. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you,
yeah.
Brian.
Thank you so much for
Thank
watching
you.
us. Thank you.